Judges, and we learned that judges are not like judges in per se what we think about judges, but as saviors, people who heed God's call and hear him, and to ask God to save them, from their wicked ways. So we're going to go to chapter 3. Let me know if you can see the screen on Facebook. Let me know. But if you can see the screen, as if I share the screen, you can see it, let me know. But if not, I won't do it. Can you see that, Pastor?
I haven't got on yet.
Okay.
Get on.
We're going to talk about the cycle of apostasy. And my first question would be for everybody is, do you know what apostasy is? And I know I mentioned it last week, and if you do, somebody can chime in on Facebook or on the phone. Does anybody know what apostasy is?
Turning away.
Well, the Apostasy, I might be pronouncing it incorrectly, but apostasy is an idolatry. And so we're going to be talking about the cycles of idolatry, and we're going to be beginning on verse 1 through 6. And it reads as follows. Now these are the nations that the Lord left to test Israel by them. That is, all of Israel who had not experienced all the wars in Canaan. It was only in order that the generations of the people of Israel might know war, to teach war to those who had not known it before. And let me stop right there. When we left off in chapter 2, one of the first things that they said in chapter 2 was that Joshua had died, and I'm going to go to the verse, none of the people that were left knew about God. Or not knew about God, but knew about the traditions. And that is Joshua 10. It says, Joshua 2 and 10. And all the generations also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that the Lord has done for Israel. So God, in his infinite wisdom, in chapter 3 says that now the nations that the Lord left to test Israel, by them, that is, all of Israel who had not experienced all the wars in Canaan. So he says there's generations that didn't know, so he had to teach them about war and teach them about him. So let's go to verse 3. These are the nations, the 5 lords of the Philistines. So these, if you're in the outline, the nations used to test Israel's loyalty is the Philistines. There were 5 lords of Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites, and who lived on Mount Lebanon from Mount Baal Hermon as far as Level House. So they were there for testing of Israel to know whether Israel will obey the commandments of the Lord, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. So the people of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And their daughters they took to themselves for wives, and their own daughters they gave to the sons, and they served their gods. And so this is a problem here. First of all, we're saying that he used the nations to test his loyalties with the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hittites. So the Philistines were in the southwest, the Canaanites was in the southeast, Canaanites. Sidonians are northwest, and the Hivites are northeast. And I'm going to pull up a map, and I'm hoping you guys can see it, on Facebook. Let me know if you can't see it. And it shows on the bottom of this map,
Have you
Where-
ever shared it yet?
huh,
Have you shared it yet on Facebook?
let me see.
I haven't, I don't see it. I see you.
I'm trying to share it. Hmm. 1 minute. Well, while I'm trying to figure that out, I'll show the map on, for everybody else, and it's here. At the bottom of this map, you should be able to see the Philistines, the Ammonites, Jebusites, and Amorites on the bottom. Can you see it? I'll make it bigger.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can share it on Facebook. Hold on 1 second.
Nancy says she don't have audio.
She can't hear me? Okay. Can she hear me now?
Let me see.
Can she hear me now? If you can hear me, let me know. I can't see anybody talking, so I need to figure it out. Can you see anybody talking?
Yeah, I'm answering.
Okay, so can they hear me now?
She hasn't responded yet.
I wonder why they couldn't hear me from the headset.
Turn my volume.
Huh?
I'm gonna turn up my volume.
Okay. Give me 1 second, we just have technical difficulties, and it won't be a problem.
No, I don't hear.
Okay, can anybody hear me? Now it's saying wait for live.
Yep.
Am I not on live?
It's telling us now to wait. Live video. Interrupted. Spin.
Okay.
Okay, I hear you. No,
No,
it just stopped.
it just stopped.
Mhm.
What the world?
Yeah, it came back, it did, as soon as it came back, it stopped.
Give me 1 second. I don't know what's going on, cause,
It might be the rain messing with the, connection.
hold on. Let me try to connect with my phone. Let's see if we can connect to my phone.
And, Kay say it's glitching.
Okay, right
So
now,
I'm telling them we're working on it.
we're working on it. Give me 1 second. Alright, it's not something I did. Let me see if I can change it. Maybe my hotspot will work.
Mine is saying no internet.
Huh?
On my computer it's saying no internet. I think it might have just been that.
Hold on. Oh, I know. That wasn't the password. Okay. So it's the internet here. Let's see. Okay, I'm back on.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Let me see if I can do this now.
Okay.
Let me go back on my page and go live.
So when you send it to Walter,
Huh?
so when you send it over to old Sheriff Walter,
You think I should just go through my timeline and then share it later?
well,
I'm gonna go
if
live
they're on
first.
there, I mean, share like, can you share like you did before? I mean, it was fine, it's just the internet.
Okay, they can see it.
Yeah, if you could hear.
Okay, can y'all see?
You sharing it?
Yeah, I'm sharing it now. Okay, so I guess I'll start from the beginning. I think that's, we're in Judges 3, sorry for the delay. Please let us know if you can hear me. I'm taking headphones out since I'm using my headset. If you can't hear me, let me know. But anyway, chapter 3, it says, now that these are the nations that the Lord left to test Israel by them, that is, all of Israel who had not experienced all the wars in Canaan. It was in order that the generations of people of Israel might know war, to teach war to those who had not known it before. These are the nations that the 5 lords of the Philistines and all the Canaanites and the Sidonians and the Hivites who lived on Mount Lebanon, from Mount Babel-Hermon as far as Lebanon Hath. They were for the testing of Israel, to know whether Israel would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. So the people of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and their daughters they took to themselves for wives, and their own daughters they gave their sons, and they served their gods. Am I being able to be heard right now?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay, so we're talking about the cycle of apostasy, and that's idolatry. So idolatry is you're worshiping other gods. The nations that God used to test Israel's loyalty was the Philistines on the southwest, and I'll show you a map. The Philistines. So this is the map of the judges of Israel, and I'm gonna make it bigger so you can see that the Philistines are on the southwest, Canaanites are on the southeast, in this diagram, they're intermingled with the other tribes. The Sidonians are in the northwest, up here, make it bigger, they up there. And the Hivites are in the northeast. And I don't believe that this map shows it, but it will be up here, if you do it north, south, east, west. So they're in the upper region. So this is who God used to test their loyalties. They live with the people. Now that's one thing that we know that they were not supposed to do, and God said destroy. They lived around the Amorites, the Pizarites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and the Canaanites. And we know from previous studies that those are the people, and we talked about Joshua, those are the people that were not supposed to, the Jews were not supposed to intermingle with. And so God wanted to test to see if they would obey the laws. Israel conducted their own CIA. So anybody, let's guess, anybody would think that they know what CIA is? Anybody in here?
Cover your own.
Well, CIA is cover your own, but in this context, it's cohabitation, intermarriage, and apostasy. That is what it is. And so, cohabitation, let me make sure y'all can see me. Can y'all see me? One second. Can y'all see me? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that y'all can see me. Cohabitation, intermarriage, and apostasy. So cohabitation means that you live among the people. Intermarriage, it says in that scripture that Israel took the enemy's daughter for wives and gave their own to the sons of the enemy and worshiped their God. And then they also, so that's part of the apostasy as well, they worship their God. This is in direct violation of Exodus 34 and 16. Stacy, can you go there for me, please?
Exodus 34:16.
And read that.
Okay. Exodus 34:16, and it reads, "And you take of their daughters for your sons, and their daughters whore after their gods, and make your sons whore after their gods."
And that's in direct violation of what God told us. Can you go to Deuteronomy 7 and 3?
Deuteronomy 7 and 3, and it reads, "You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons, or taking their daughters for your sons. For they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods."
So that's exactly what they have done. They have turned them away from following their God. Okay, so let's go now to, we're going to go to Judges 3 and 7. And it says, "And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they sold them into the hands of the crustacean." Let me do that again. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they forgot that the Lord their God, and they served Baals and Asherah. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Christian, I'm gonna say it wrong, Cushan with the king of Mesopotamia. And the people of Israel served Cushan for 8 years. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel who saved them, of Abner the son of Kinzan, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel. And he went out to war, and the Lord gave Cushan the king of Mesopotamia into his hand. and his hand prevailed over Chrisan, and so the land has rested 40 years. Then Othanel, the son of Kenaz, died. So Othanel was the first judge that we're coming up to. Remember that these are not regular judges. These are judges, like kind of like Joshua, kind of like Moses that God spoke through. And so they served Babel and Asherah, and Babel and Asherah served creatures rather than the Creator. They took a wooden pole and planted it, and they made an altar. They made a sacred symbol, and it's a characteristic that featured in the Canaanites. So the Israelites adopted this. So they made an altar to Babel, and this was done in Bethel, also known as Jerusalem, by the altar of Jehovah. And they talk about this altar in 2 Kings 13 and 6, 2 Kings 23 and 6, 2 Kings 23 and 15, Deuteronomy 16 and 21. Stacy, can you read Deuteronomy 16 and 21, please?
Deuteronomy 16:21, and it reads, "You shall not plant any tree as an Asherah beside the altar of the Lord your God that you shall make. And you shall not set up a pillar which the Lord your God hates."
Keep on.
Deuteronomy 17.
Mm-hmm. It's 16 and 21, that's it. And so basically, is it ended?
Mm-hmm.
Why did it end? Anyway, I'm gonna keep on going on. And so this is right there evidence of what they're not supposed to do. I want to talk about the pattern that emerges, okay? The pattern that emerges from this is that they did evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. So that's the action. In order for God to react the way God is reacting, put them in captivity, they had to do something wrong, right?
Yes.
The next thing is the result. And what was the result? Anybody in here?
They will be sold into, or taken over by another nation.
And they were sold, right? To the Christian, whatever, king of Aram, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of Mesopotamia. They were sentenced under him for how many years? If we look in the scripture.
That's in Judges
18 years.
18 years.
18. Okay. And then the cry was by Othello, was Caleb's nephew. And we talked about that in Judges 1 and 13. That's when he came into the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they were restored, right? Because he fought and got them back. And they prevailed for how many years? According to the scripture.
Was it 40?
40 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. So this is the pattern that we need to look at. They do the evil, there is a result, they have a sentence, they cry, they get restored, they have peace, and then the judge died. So let's go to Judges 3, 12 through 30, okay? And it says, we're going to be talking about the new judge, Ehud. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened Ehud, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He gathered himself from the Amorites and the Ephraimites and went and defeated Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. So, the city of palms, for everybody to know, is Jerusalem. Let me make sure. No, Jericho. Sorry, the city of palms is Jericho, and that was a district that was once famous for its palms, its balsam woods, and its gardens. So we're back at Jericho. Okay? And the people of Israel served, 14. The people of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, for 18 years. So let's go back. I want to make sure that was right. Let's make a correction. On Bethel, they were under captivity for 8 years. Their census was 8 years. Ehud is 18 years. Okay? Let's make sure that's corrected. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up them for a deliverer. And Ehud, the son of Jura, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. And the people of Israel sent. For some reason, my Bible skipped to John. And the people of Israel, go back. Amen. That we not win today. All right. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up the deliverer, the son of Jura, the Benjamite, the left-handed man, and the people of Israel sent a tribe by him to Eglon, the king of Moab. Ehud made for himself a sword with 2 edges, a cubit in length, and he bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. And he presented to the tribute to the Eglon, king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man. So before we get there, they made a point about the left-handedness. Now everybody knows that most of the time, if somebody's left-handed back in the day, that meant that person was evil. They made a point to say that he was left-handed was because he had injured, he could not use his right side. His right side, he was handicapped. But most of the Benjamites were trained this way. They were ambidextrous. They could use right and they could use their left hands. Okay? And so, so they were able to fight either type of way. They wanted to make sure that they knew that the reader knew this. And they also wanted you to know that he had a sword that wasn't anything but 18 inches to 45 centimeters. So it was enough, a 2-edged sword, enough to be hidden when he get patted down. Okay? So let's go back to the scripture. And we said that he's a very fat man. This is a very obese man. Very, very fat. And verse 18. And when Ehud had finished presenting his tribute, and a tribute means that he is giving something to the king to show how his loyalty is. And he sent the people away who carried the tribute. But he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he commanded silence, and all his attendants went out from his presence. And Ehud came to him as he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message for God for you. And he arose from his seat. And Ehud reached with his left hand and took the sword from his right thigh and thrust it into his belly. And the hilt also went into after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not pull the sword out of his belly. And the dung came out. Then Ehud went out into the porch and closed the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. When he had gone, the servants came, and when they saw that the doors of the roof chamber were locked, they thought, surely he is relieving himself in the closet of the cool chamber. And then they waited until they were embarrassed. But when he still did not open the doors of the roof chamber, they took the key and opened them, and they laid their dead on the floor. Ehud escaped while they delayed, and he passed beyond the idols and escaped to Sirah. When he arrived, he sounded the trumpet in the hills of the country of Ephraim. Then the people of Israel went down from the hill country, and he was their leader. And he said to them, follow me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites, and did not allow anyone to pass. And they killed at that time 10,000 of the Moabites, all strong, able-bodied men, not a man escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land rested for 80 years. So, let's go back to our pattern. They did what?
Was evil.
Evil. And the evil was idolatry, because they paying tribute to this king, right? And then the result is we have the king of Moab. And he used the Amorites to defeat Israel. And they took possession of the very city that the first big city that Joshua took was what? Jericho, right? They took the city of palms. Let's go to Deuteronomy 34 and 3. And for reference, I'm on my page live right now. So if anybody wants to go to my page, they can. That is my Facebook friend. I will share this live later. The internet is acting crazy today. Can you read Deuteronomy 34 for me, please?
The Negev and the plain, that is, the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar.
And then there's 34 and 3, the city of palm tree is the basically describing how far it is. It's started at Jericho. So now we got the result. The king of Moab has abducted with the Amorites and defeated Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long is their sentence? 18 years. They cried, and Ehud is sprung up. He's a Benjamite who was handicapped. And then he bounded in the clothes on his thigh. Now, I got this information from Eastward. Is it implied that the servants saw Ehud go out by the usual way? So evidently, they knew that their master was alone, and they figured that he was in the restroom, cooling himself. So they didn't go in because they didn't want to embarrass him, and they sat out as long as they could and went out. Then restoration. They killed 10,000 Moabites, right? Mm-hmm. And then the last cycle was how many years of peace did they have? 80 years of peace. So that means that Ehud had to die, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then on we're going to go back to Judges 31. And after him was Shamgar, the son of Asa, who killed 600 of the Philistines with an ox guard, and he also saved Israel. Now mind you, he saved Israel with a weapon of an ox guard. And he was the son of Athanan. There's little of no information about this guy. Basically, you have one sentence about him. He passes as once from Ehud to Deborah. He's often recognized as a minor judge, but the account given here is not a model form. So what is the model that we've been having? We have what? They do evil, right?
Do evil,
result, right, which is captivity. Mm-hmm. It doesn't explain how long they were captive, but we can tell probably by the Philistine by that one sentence, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know how long they were sentenced. We do know they had to cry for Shamgar to come up, right?
Right. We
do know that 600 Philistines were killed, so they were restored, but we don't know for how long. Right. And so that we don't have the same kind of chronology that we have with everybody else. It's also noted that the Philistine in this period of Ehud and Deborah kind of comes too early, so they're saying that they don't know if Shamgar is supposed to be right after Ehud or not. All they know is that there's one sentence about him actually, and everybody understands that the Bible is comprised and pieces of some writings, or we don't have the complete book at this point. Now, an ox guard is a pole from 6 to 8 feet long with a pointy end of iron on it. Let's go to Acts 26 and 14. can you read that for me, Stacy?
And when he had all fallen to the ground, and when we had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads.
That's 26 and 14, Acts.
26:14.
Let me double check something. An axe guard could really be used as a readily spear. So he killed all those Philistines with an axe guard. Let me look for something. That might be a typo. Either way,
The goal is
Right.
the same
Are
thing.
you kicking against the goads?
Kicking against the prick, which is the
thank
prick
you. I was
that
like, I
pricks.
know that I was.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just a different, sorry, thank you. It's a different, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you have different translations. I'm sitting there for like, am I just typing stuff? Okay, and so my version says, and when he had fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It's hard for you to kick against the God, G-A-A-B-S. And so that's what they're talking about in axe guard. And so it's just one sentence that talks about him. But what's important to me in chapter 3 is that we see this cycle of apostasy. We have to make sure that we see this cycle because this cycle repeats itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could you take this same cycle and place it anywhere else in the Bible?
Yes.
How so? How so?
You can use it with the Israelites when they were in the wilderness.
Okay. So they did evil.
Mm-hmm.
And what was their result? They had to stay in captivity for 40 years.
Right.
Right?
Right.
400 years.
400 years, but didn't they have to walk around?
Oh, you
for
talking
40
about the wilderness march? Okay,
Yeah.
40 years, right?
Yeah,
right,
40
right.
years.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm like, okay, Pastor, now 40 years. Okay, so that's the result, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they disobeyed. Of course, we talked about that last week. So 40 years was their sentence.
Yeah.
And so their cry was Moses was their representative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They were actually restored then during Joshua's time, right?
Right.
And they prevailed.
Yes.
And they stayed peaceful. If we go back to Judges chapter 1, I believe it says how long it was that they were able to have peace. Let's see. It had to be some generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a long time when they had peace, even after Joshua passed away, right? Because they still had elders that knew what was going on. So now that the elders are all died, remember we just talked about that earlier. Now God is testing them. So that's where we started out. So this pattern is not only in Judges, it is also throughout the whole Bible. They do evil, most times idolatry, or the CIA that we talked about earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically it's always the CIA. They always cohabitating. They always having intermarriages. They're always idol worshiping, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they want to
Right.
cry and say, God, please help us. And once he does that, right, he restores them, and then they seem like they get it, and then it starts all over again.
Right.
So we're talking about the Israelites, but in reality, isn't that what happens to us? Are we stuck in this cycle? Do we do evil and expect God to
Send us a deliverer.
send us a deliverer? Do we cry out and say, God, please help us, please help us, please help us? And he does that, we get delivered, we get saved, we get grace, and we start all over again.
What I find quite interesting is that his basis for deliverance,
Can you speak up for me, please, so I can hear you?
his basis for deliverance is his word
Correct.
that he gave to Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
That they deserved to be annihilated because they disobeyed him, but he promised to Abraham that there will always be this remnant. And they're crying out. It's not that they do any good. They get delivered and live in peace, but they still fall back after that generation has been delivered, dies out. Everybody falls back to doing things their own way, follow their own path. And that's the plight of man. I mean, we want to get delivered, and he sent Jesus to deliver us, but the only problem is that even though Jesus come to deliver us from all sin, for some reason or another, we do the same thing the Israelites do. Once we get over the calamity, we cool, and then we fall right back into idolatry.
And it's a cycle. We go, we keep going. It's a cycle. So this chapter 3 is basically the outline of how we're going to approach the rest of the judges. The only one we could not apply that to was what is his name? Shagar, which has one sentence. So there's no way that we could have applied that, but I bet you, if we have more information on this guy, we could do that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because he had to remind you that when God defeats a nation, he don't have to use gigantic guns and cannons. It's always something simple.
Right.
Okay, Ehud used a double-bladed sword. And let's just understand something. The reason why the king was not really tripping off this Benjamite, because he was handicapped. And so he was handicapped, and he was like, well, he gave me something. He's overly fat. He wants to know the secret for God, even though he don't worship God. He wants to know what God wants to say to him. And in his greed and in his inquisitiveness, he gets killed. Now, commentaries, one of the commentaries Pastor provided me saying that he stuck the knife into this man's belly so far, he never retrieved the knife. This is how big the man was. And so it made him defecate on himself, if anybody don't know what dung is. Yeah. And he just sat there. And his people were like, oh, he's so fat. Mind you, if you're that fat during that time, it might take you a little while to do what you have to do. And I'm just being real about it. And they was like, well, we're going to leave him in there. And they got embarrassed. Why are they embarrassed? Because they were like, well, how long is this going to take him? And so they finally go in there, because you don't want to go in there in the middle of him doing what he's doing and get in trouble.
Right.
And then they find their king dead. And that gives the Israelites time to set up their attack. Right?
Right.
So this is the visualization, how they are able to infiltrate their captors, right? And God restores them, and God rewards them. And they don't even deserve it. Because what's going to happen is that when that leader, that person that hears from God, that judge hears from God, dies, those people forget. Let's think about it. When what is his name? Nathaniel, it was only 8 years that they were in captivity, right? So then they had peace for 40 years. So then that means that's enough time for a whole different generation to come up,
Right.
and not listen. So then Ehud has to come up, and they were in captivity with so now they got 10 more years added, so it's 18 years, right? And so then it took them 18 years. Well, 18 years, that's another generation that don't know nothing.
Right.
Right? And so then now they have 80 years of peace.
Right.
Now, I don't know how many years it was between, they say the Shamgar is supposed to be after Deborah, and you know what, it might make sense because they really didn't have a lot of interaction until Samson with the Philistines. to Samson come on the scene, so he might be after him, he might be before. It doesn't matter. The whole point is that he had to rise up to save them, right?
Right.
So now we can take this same, we were in the Old Testament, let's take this same pattern and apply it to New Testament. Give me a New Testament situation in order we can apply this cycle of apostasy. Okay, let's think about, we focused and walked the truth for a long time on John the Baptist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so of course we know that the Jews were doing evil, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They were conspiring with Rome, right? They were doing whatever Rome told them to do.
Right.
Their Jewish traditions were just traditions. They weren't really believing. The elders were in cahoots with the Romans, right?
Right, the Herodians.
Yeah. So they did evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
The result is they basically are patsies, and they are very to violate everything, right?
Right.
Okay, they're sentenced to be